Without further ado, let's get Jim up here and get him pouring out his heart and wisdom.
So I presume I got sound and everything.
You got sound. This is good.
Yeah.
I want to bless you and pray for you.
Yeah, we'll need that.
Wow. Thank you, God, for Jim. Thank you for the message and the anointing and the heart that you placed on his life. And we just say yes to what you want to manifest of your mercy and wisdom through him today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So you'll all be pleased to know that there's no PowerPoints with my presentation to have to fight with. Yeah. All right. And already I'm departing from my plan because last night I had a dream. And in this dream, this woman who I dream of quite often was there. And she said to me, this is taking longer than we all hoped. Now this dream person that I have met, that took a very, very long time, wondering why she was always in my dream. And then one day she told me that her name was Sandy. And then I remembered that my mother said that if I had been born a girl, they would have named me Sandy. And so this is like the female part of my personality that follows me around. We have this interaction, trying to have these two perspectives on life. And what we're talking about is how long it's taking us to grow up or become the people that God meant us to be, and it's taking longer than all of us hoped. And really, I think that's what gathers all of the people together that are interested in the life model, or that I talk with, or that we share, or that come to these times. It's taking longer than we hope, and we hoped that it would work better than it has, becoming Christians, becoming the kind of people we want to be. And I guess what we've been discovering is that one of the reasons it's been taking longer than we hoped is that we've been sort of going around about it the wrong way. As Michael was saying earlier, Western Christianity has settled on the idea that the way you become better Christians is through better information and better choices and better understanding and beliefs. And so we've all met people who have all of their beliefs about as right as they think they can get them, and they're just flat, unpleasant people to be around. And, I found that getting all of my beliefs straight didn't make me a more enjoyable person, didn't help me relationally, didn't really help my character. In fact, I now knew all of the things I shouldn't be thinking, doing, feeling, and reacting with, but that didn't really do very much to give me the right reactions and feelings and that sort of thing. So when we begin to understand how it was that God created the brain to work, it turns out that it's quite a bit different than the systems that have been used in theology. So just to give you a real short history about that, the Jewish way of understanding the world really didn't divide human beings up very much. It was sort of, things worked together, and there were sort of centers out of which things worked together, but we weren't very much divided up. However, the Greeks really did divide things up a great deal, and so they said you have all of these different characteristics in your mind. You've got your reason, you've got your intellect, you've got your memory. All these factors were separated out differently. And so when the Christianity began in the Jewish culture, what didn't take very long before all those ideas of how we are divided up became the core of theology, because that's how people were understood to be. And so this persisted all the way through the Middle Ages, when some of the features in human beings got elevated more than another, trying to figure out how did salvation work, really. And so the one that came right to the top was the will, because everything about you, all the other features of your personality, couldn't save you, and your will by itself couldn't. But if you made the right choice to follow Jesus, the will must somehow be a little bit better than all of the other features if we divide the brain, the body up that way. And so that sort of made sense given the understanding of the time. But if you're going to make the right choices, then you have to have the right information, don't you? So then you had to believe the right thing. So belief and intellect and understanding, they all coming up to the top as here's the way that you do things. Now, here's the problem when we get to the modern language. The will now means something quite a bit different than it did, let's say 500 or to 1,000 years ago. Back when they talked about the will, it sort of meant the essence of you. So, the central part of you would be your will. But the will no longer really means the central part of you. It means that part of you that decides I'll go to bed at 7:30 instead of 8:30 or whatever it is, makes these decisions. And the problem with that when we get to your brain is that your brain has a whole bunch of different wills. You've noticed this every time, right? Like, part of you is saying, I'm giving up carbs, and another part of you is going, no, we're not. We have these will fights, and then your brain, your will is one of the easiest changed parts of you that there is. So that you decide, I'm going down this. No, I'm not. I'm going this way. No, I'm going to stop at Starbucks first. And I'm going to. Your will is forever changing directions, which is also one of the reasons that it's become very appealing. Because if Christianity is just about making some good choices, then shouldn't we just get people to make the right decisions? And so Billy Graham went around the world having people making decisions. If you made the right decision, that should take care of your future. And the thing that broke Billy Graham's heart was that only 5 to 7% of the people that made the right decisions in his crusade ever became part of a church fellowship. And I was talking recently to somebody out in Korea who is doing this over there, and they're finding that they get thousands of high school students to make decisions to follow Jesus. They understand the need for this in their life. But when they go to visit churches, they in their high school ways are not wanted particularly. They're found to be, just unsettling, and they also find very quickly that they don't like these church environments they've dropped into. And so the kind of people that we are and the kind of people that they are becomes us and them, and they don't settle in. And so this decision actually hasn't changed either the people who are in the church or the people trying to come into the church very much when it comes to character. So we don't get along. I don't know if you've noticed that at church, but church really doesn't enhance your chances of getting along with anybody. And in fact, it's a pretty good chance you'll meet somebody you don't get along with if you get there. And if you can gather enough people who you get along with, somebody's going to visit your church you won't get along with. And then that becomes sort of the standard thing that we're all used to, right? So what would it take to change the kind of people that we are? And that's what we really got together about 40 years ago to try to study, that ultimately became the life model. And we decided we don't want to just study the techniques, because people have techniques that'll improve your personality. And you could make a long collection of things that work for some people. Now, for instance, one of the things that we're dealing right now with is spiritual disciplines. And spiritual disciplines work really well for some people and not at all for others. And they work really well at some phases of your life and really not so well for others. But if you made a collection of everything that worked for somebody and tried to make everybody do it, it would drive us all crazy. So what we were actually looking for is, what are the reasons, what are the mechanisms, almost like sort of the way an engineer might go about it. What are the principles involved that explain why some things work and why other things work sometimes and not others. And so that's what we were trying to do. So basically, it seemed like there are two principles we got to pay close attention to. One is, everybody who's trying to learn to be a Christian is running a human brain. So you're having to train that thing to be like a Christian. That's in common for everybody. And the other thing is that whatever God said was true, so God's truths apply to everybody. This is the same regardless of culture or race or background or other experience. These two things must always apply. And whether they come together is the field that we call neurotheology. It's like the brain and the Bible. Wherever you see these two things overlap and something lights up on both maps, you go, well, we should maybe pay some attention to that so that we can teach our brain the way the brain learns and changes how to become Christian. Now, the brain actually, when you're born, you may have noticed little babies are not terribly human. They don't know how to do almost everything that human culture requires. And they have to learn that. So if we learned how does the brain learn to become human, then we would know how the mechanisms by which the brain might learn to become a special kind of human that has the characteristics of Jesus in there. So this is the overlap that we're looking for all along. And whenever we've come across these details, we've tried to make them sort of systematic and teachable. And the way that generally works is that I take the science and I try to put it into a sort of a non-scientific worldview. So how people who don't have a Western education can still understand these are the principles we need for being human. However, that doesn't penetrate into culture very well. It's sort of like taking science and turning it into nutritional facts. So you must have this many calories and this many, proteins and all of that blend and stuff like that. Now you know exactly what your diet should look like, but you can't take that to a restaurant and get people to buy it and eat it. Because in our culture or whatever it is, we like curry powder in ours, and ours we like onions, and ours we like our, spicy hot, and all those things can be added in, and those are the flavors of culture that have to be added into this recipe. And so Christianity has been very culturized. So you go to any part in the world, and where there's Christians, you'll find that they've brought Christianity and their culture together in some way or another. But they look much more like the other members of their culture than they look like Christians someplace else. And the things that we've lost in the West is any sense of how our culture has made us really think quite differently than Scripture thinks about stuff. And so I'm going to try to cover a few of those things that when we look at the brain, we can start making sense of again. And so one other comment about my conversation with Sandy in my dream is taking longer than it seems like that we dreamed of or we'd hoped it would. It took us about 20 years to figure out how to do trauma recovery using this Emmanuel prayer that now turns out to be so simple that in many parts of the world we can do it with 3 pictures and no words. That's extremely easy and simple to do. And so we said to Jesus, those of us who had started way at the other end and spent 30 years on this path, trying to figure it out. It says, now it's just so easy for you. Why has it taken us so long to figure it out? And why have we spent so many hours with people in counseling and all the rest of that? And the answer that Jesus gave us was very interesting to me. And this is, the thought that came into our mind when I says the answer Jesus gave us, he didn't, write it on the board in godlike handwriting or anything like that. It's an idea that came into our mind that we had to look at later to see, does that actually sound like Jesus speaking? So the first thing we have to do is demystify this business of God talking to us. Because as Jane Willard once said, she was asking Jesus about this, and God said to her, "You expect me to speak to you in my cathedral voice. Like, thus saith the Lord, Jane, please write this down. In fact, I shall make this pen smoke as it goes across. And he doesn't. He actually shares thoughts with us. And when the thoughts come into our mind, you normally notice the devil's thoughts because of the way they have sort of burning characteristic. But we don't notice God's thoughts in the same way because they blend rather nicely. They just, They might be shocking to us, but we just think to ourselves, wow, I just thought of something I never thought of before. This is a fascinating thought. There's something just so attractive that we tend to own those thoughts that come from God and think, well, I must have thought of this brilliant thing. Well, let me just give you an example, right? Because you're talking about your golden memories a little bit. I hope I'm now stacking stories on top of stories, and I hope I get back, because normally my wife is in the front row, and she said, you never got back to this story. So if I don't get back to one, you're allowed to remind me. And so I'm up in a mango tree. I'm about 12 years old, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and at the top of the mango tree, it's 125 feet up, and there was these branches that you could just lay down on, and they're just so comfortable. Look at the sky, and the ripe mangoes right there, you eat them, and as I was laying there and feeling kind of drowsy, the thought came to my mind that I should take my belt off and wrap it around the branches and then around myself. Weird thought, and I've thought of that before. And so I did, and next thing I remember, I'm waking up, I'm rolling over, and I'm looking down at the ground 125 feet below, and this belt is holding me under the mango tree. Now, I have always remembered that terrifying moment of looking down 125 feet and thinking, but for the belt, I'd be dead. And so I was doing one of these, ask God for showing you a golden memory, and the thought that popped into my head as I'm looking down to the ground 125 feet below, and I said, well, I have no sense of God being with me in this. In fact, it's a terrifying memory. Why is this coming into my mind as a golden moment? And then the thought came into my mind, I'm the one that told you to put your belt around the tree. And I remember even at the time thinking, why? I've never thought of putting my belt around a tree before. This is a weird thought that I had. All my life I registered it as a weird thought. I never credited God with the source of the thought. This is before seat belts, for some of you that don't know about it. I've never seen a seat belt at that point in my life, knew nothing about it, so even that concept wasn't there. But God had put a thought in there, and he'd saved my life. Now, this is very helpful to me to know, because it seems like God is looking out for me when I don't know what I'm doing. And he often gives me an idea which at the time I don't understand very well. But he's part of thinking with me. So now, if that's what it means that when God is talking to us, now why did I start talking about why God? Yes, why it took so long. Yes, so God said to us, "Here's, thank you so much. You're just like a group mind to help me think about this together." And so that's what I'm trying to do. Actually, is get us to think about this together. So, what God says then was, healing is very easy. Making you folks have a relationship with each other takes a long time. So I had to keep the two of you in that room working on how do you do trauma recovery, not because it was so hard to recover from trauma, because it's just so hard to get an attachment or a bond forming between you, my people down there. So you had to suffer through 3 years to get to there, because that suffering together through 3 years of not knowing what you were doing actually formed a relationship that has some enduring qualities. That's the thing I want. Once that was accomplished, the trauma's out of the way. We just took care of that in a few minutes. And that really has totally configured my way of thinking about church and relationships and almost everything else we do quite differently. It's really not that hard to get a worship band together or to play a song. But to make a spiritual family, a connection, a bond that endures between all of you, God really has to let a lot of things go wrong for rather a long time. And it's largely because we are not trying to form a bond together as a band, but we're trying to get a song done. And if we focus on getting the song done, we don't get the other accomplished very much. If we focused on how do we form an enduring bond with each other, the songs could get done a whole lot faster. If I spent less time working on preparing a sermon and more time figuring out how do I open my heart to what it is that you folks need to hear and how we're going to connect, we would actually get whatever needs to be said together, even if you have to remind me when I got off track. See, because we're now thinking and working together, and God's creating something here that's a whole lot harder to create than good ideas and good sermons and good exegesis and all the rest of that. This is the shift that we're trying to make. And so the part of your brain that does all of that is what Michael referred to as the fast track in your brain. He said it's preconscious. I don't actually like the word preconscious because it sort of makes you think like your brain was doing this behind your back. It's actually supraconscious. It's going faster than your brain can keep up with, which is why for 2,000 years of trying to figure it out, we always missed it. Because we're looking at something that we can observe, and anything that goes faster than we can think consciously, we can't observe. You ever watch any of those Star Wars movies where they're moving super fast, and you can kind of see something's happening, but you can't quite keep track of the action? They intentionally sped up the action to fast track speed so that your conscious mind can't keep up with it, but you can still observe that it's happening. If they went faster than that, it would turn to a blur. And you're like, what was that? And I couldn't make any sense of it all. You can track it, but you can't consciously explain what it was you were tracking. It's just like everything went too fast, but I still knew what it was. And that's what we're talking about. Your brain is always trying to figure out, who am I right now? And we never catch our brain figuring out who am I, because it always figures it out before we're consciously figuring out. So what we end up, I know who I am, now I'm trying to figure out what's going on. That's step number 2. Who am I? What's going on? What's going on is slow track, and it's also very focused. So one of the characteristics of the slow track is it can never grasp reality. Very important for us to know. It's always too focused. I kind of have a sense for everybody in the room if I go fast track. And what's going on, and everything that's important is in there somehow or another, but I can't focus on it. When I want to stop and focus on you, I lose track of everything else in the room to some extent, right? That's the slow track. So beliefs and understandings are all slow track. And they're trying to focus on solving a problem, not on who I am. So the problem that we have when we put ideas and concepts and beliefs into it always is very helpful for solving problems, but it doesn't touch the systems that tell me who I am. Now that's a pretty good description of most Christianity. I know what I think, I know how to solve problems, I can't change who I am. Somehow the Christianity has not touched that part of my system. How is it that it's going to happen? Well, the problem is that will choices and solving problems all downstream from the supraconscious process that's telling me who I am. So you put information in down there, I can tell you what's wrong with who I am, but it doesn't change who I am. Now, there's one other little thing that I might add, and that is that you're always wrong. That's because you've so over-focused. The brain always does this in the slow track. You're so over-focused that you only got part of what was wrong, not really what the whole picture was. And so fundamental to the life model, and I think to theology, comes this understanding that's really, really hard to kind of grasp and live with, and that is you cannot ever figure out the right thing to do. That is, who I am and what should I do right now is something we can never solve on our own. Fundamental human problem. So when I know I'm doing the right thing, the absolute compelling truth is I'm wrong. And how much of our Christianity has come down to knowing the right thing to do? Right? So, and then we'll move back to the brain's interesting solution in the fast track for knowing what to do. But let's first talk about why we can't know what to do. Well, the Old Testament has 613 laws according to the rabbis who figured this out very carefully, and they're all simultaneously true. So far, okay? So if you have a system in which there are 613 things that are simultaneously true, this is just the Old Testament. The New Testament adds a few more. But if you do have a system in which there are 613 things that are simultaneously true, that creates 2 to the 613th power options that you must consider in order to figure out the right thing to do. Now that's a big number, so let's convert it to normal scientific notation, which is 3.4 times 10 to the 184th power. Still a little vague for most of us right there, so we'll just forget the 3.4 right now, and we'll stay with that 10th to the 184th power, and we'll compare it to some things that you do know, so you can have a sort of a comparison there. So the number of known stars in the universe is 10 to the 24th power. Right? So 10 with 24 zeros after it, that's how many stars there are in the known universe. Now the number of options we're considering is 10 to the 184, not 10 to the 24. So 184 zeros is a lot more options than there are stars in the universe. So, and that's assuming that there are just everything the Hubble telescope and all that can observe. So let's think about photons of light. You know photons, those little particles of light, so that a 100-watt light bulb will create 3.3 photons times 10 to the 20th power every second. So that's a lot of photons flying out of a 10. There's a lot more going out here. So let's figure out how many photons there's been since the beginning of the universe, given the number of stars and the current estimate that the universe has been around 13.7 billion years. And that there are 2 trillion galaxies, and each of them contains a trillion of trillion stars. And that would end up to be 4 times 10 to the 84 photons since the beginning of time in the known universe from all stars combined together. Now that's 84. Remember, our number is 184. So we still at least have 100 zeros to consider. And this is just figuring out the right thing to do based on the Old Testament laws. All right? So let's try something else. Atoms in a drop of water is 10 to the 21st. 21 zeros after it. So that's in one drop of water. So let's consider all the atoms in the known universe, and now we come up with 10 with 80 zeros after it. So if every atom in the known universe was one of the options, we would be 104 zeros short of enough atoms to represent one for every choice you would have to consider based on the Old Testament laws to know the right thing to do. So let's suppose then that every atom in the known universe was one brain cell in your brain. You would not have nearly enough brain cells altogether to figure this out. So to kind of get close enough again, so let's make every atom in our known universe into another universe the size of ours. Now we would have 10 to 160. We're getting close. But we're still way off. We're still way short. If every atom in our universe became another universe the size of ours, we would have to do that again by the number of stars there are in our universe, multiply it by that many times, so that every atom in those all the stars' universes, with everyone being the size of our universe, every atom represented one choice you would have to consider in order to decide the right thing to do based on the Old Testament laws alone. Now, you have 10 to the 13th power brain cells. That's 13. That's a lot short of 184. But if each of your brain cells fired 10 times a second, so it's going about as fast as it can go without dying, and each one of them calculated the universe of possibilities, that's 10 to the 80th, as many as there are atoms in the universe. So each cell could do that each time it fired. It would take you 340 years to conclude the right thing to do about the first decision that you had, assuming your brain did nothing other than calculate this with each cell doing a universe of calculations each time. Now, the only thing is this is way too simple, because some of the Old Testament laws are more important than others. Jesus made this point, right? You should give a tithe of the mint and cumin without forgetting the greater, weightier things in the law, which are the things about love. So if each of the laws are not equally important, then you have to figure out which order they come in. Now the number of calculations goes up to 10 to the 1,450 power, which, remember that we had 184, now we have 1,450. I'm not even going to start on what the math would look like for that. Now, this is just you're figuring out the right thing to do based on Old Testament law. And I will tell you, based on those statistics, it's way beyond infinitesimally possible that you could ever get an answer right. And now if you decide we're going to figure this out in terms of something that doesn't affect just me alone but affects two other people, now we have added astronomically to the numbers that are involved. So the end result is that it is impossible for anybody at any time, any human being, to tell you the right thing to do. Now, how many laws do you have to know the wrong thing to do? The answer is one. It's within our possibility to calculate I'm doing the wrong thing. Right? And the one law says I shouldn't do this. I can figure that out. So the law can condemn you. It can tell you without a doubt you did not do the right thing here. But there's no way that any human brain can ever figure out the right thing to do. Now, Jesus had to live with a human brain and do so sinlessly. So how did he do that? Anyone remember how he did that? Yes, I only do what I see my Father doing. I never calculate the right thing to do. I just I follow what God is doing. And by faith, I believe that what God is doing is the right thing, although I can't prove it. Now, suppose we begin to live that way also. You see, we no longer this would really put an end to all Christian moralizing. We could say, well, this isn't the right thing to do, but what on earth are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to love people who are different than us? How are we supposed to treat people right now? Well, we would not know the right thing to do unless we saw what God was doing and followed God's example, right? Now, we could never prove that that was the right thing to do. Well, if we did, we'd always be 100% wrong. And Christians persist in doing that. But it's really, really hard to live with the certainty that I will never know the right thing to do. All I can do is to share thoughts with God. Now the question is there capacity in the human brain that would let me share thoughts with God? And in the fast track of the brain, there is a system called, it's in the cingulate cortex, but it creates a state of mutual mind. In this state of mutual mind, I and another person are thinking the same thoughts at the same time, and the mutual mind system is part of our identity building circuit. So whatever goes through mutual mind can actually impact who I am, whereas what goes through my logical mind does not change my identity. But if I begin to think with somebody else about something, so any of you ever had children or grandchildren or anything like that, right? And here comes along someone you've never seen before, but you begin to look at them through the eyes of the people that love them, and in seeing them, you begin to see something that creates love in you, and it creates a relationship where none existed before, and they become my people, and we're connected in some ways that some days we hate, and other days we think it's the most wonderful thing that ever happened to us. That's because we're beginning to see and think with someone else the way that someone we care about thinks and sees about them. So now, does God care about the world? Right. If we begin to see and think about the world and even ourselves the way God sees and thinks and cares about us, our minds shift. They begin to think that that's the way we think about it. So my first and basic reaction when I see somebody that I care about, even if they're doing something I don't like, is I'm connected to this person. There's something here. I have to look out for them even if they're doing what I don't like, which often happens with your kids and other people, that you like, and they're doing something you don't like, and you're still connected to them, right? But it feels like I'm part of this. I'm part of whatever's going to happen next. Whatever this is has to be resolved the way we do things here. And so that's that mutual mind state. Now, let's see. Yeah, I've got some time yet. So I'm going to talk about cell phones as they're currently the rage. When I flew out here, I had to put this cell phone on airplane mode. Okay? Airplane mode, this cell phone has all the same systems inside of it that it has when it's not on airplane mode. It just doesn't know anybody outside is talking to it. Right? That part is off. Are there still radio towers and other people trying to call me and all the emails trying to come in and all the rest of that? Yes or no? Yes, right. But it doesn't know. So your brain has an airplane mode in it, a non-relational mode, in which when you switch off your relational connection, you do not know that anybody else in the world is trying to communicate with you. You feel alone. You ever felt alone in your life, abandoned, uncared for? Was God still there? In theory, we say yes. But if our brain is in airplane mode, it has no way of knowing. The relational circuit, this mutual mind system, the one we're talking about, should it be off, we have no idea that any other mind is out there or cares about us or feels anything else. It's not because they're not there, but we have absolutely no way of knowing it. So we can honestly say, I'm getting nothing from God. I'm getting no reaction. You ever had that in your human relationships? So where they're shut off, you're just not getting any sense. This can really happen quite easily. My wife walks into the room when I'm writing, and she will stop where I can see her, but at that point, she is an intrusion that has just come into the room to get in the way of my writing. I don't recognize her as a person or anything she might say to me at that point. At best, I might like, but if you ask me a second later, what did she say? I could not tell you. A signal came through, I didn't pick it up. She might say, I'm going to, the store, do you need anything? And I go, The wrong answer, she would know. Then I might go upstairs later on, where is she? And where did she go? Why is she not here? But I would have because I'm in airplane mode, I'm focused. My right hemisphere is non-relational, and I'm focused on a task. I have got to get this paragraph to read like English. And I could tell you all about that paragraph, but I couldn't tell you a thing about what she said because we never had a mutual mind moment. Now, so she will walk down, she'll stop, and I recognize that, computer terms, interrupt vector has been issued, and I need to deal with this issue on the side. So I finish my sentence, but what are we going to do? And then I try to remind myself that we have a relationship, and I turn to her, try to connect with her, get my relational mind back on, and go, she's about to say something that should strike me as important, for which I have to remember she's an important person to me. And I actually want these things to go well, and I want her to be supportive of my writing, and so there's all these things that can inform the whole thing mentally. But I have to actually remember I want to know what she has to say. Once I do that, my brain is out of airplane mode, it's back into relational mode. Now what she says, I will connect with. I'll have significant emotional reactions to. I will remember it later on when I go upstairs. Oh, she's off that way, and this is what's going on, or whatever the situation might be. See, and we all have these things, and they're extremely easy to observe. And some people rarely go into airplane mode. And some people spend almost their entire life there. They almost never get out of it, right? And we know who they are because we've interacted with them before, right? And usually in any couple, one of them is much more prone to be in airplane mode than the other, but that's what makes it interesting, I guess. So the point is, however, while your relational circuits are off, you don't know that God is there, or if he does say anything to you, it'll strike you as not the least bit important. So a few seconds later, you can't even remember the thought went through your head. So wouldn't it be important for us as Christians, if that's the case and we want to be a mutual mind with God, to stay in a relational state where we're open to whatever God might want to put in our mind, and that we would track what that was as important? Well, I don't want to complicate things too much, but we can actually be in that kind of relational mode, but still in two different kinds of ways. And that is, your brain can track other people because they strike you as someone I care about, one of my people, or because they're my enemy. So, you'll notice, particularly in politics, because it's so easy to notice there, that people are tracking what other people are saying and doing extremely carefully, but with no intention of having a relationship with them or caring the slightest bit about them. All they're going to do is make sure that whoever else it is that they're tracking will fail. Right? So, it's okay to be in relational mode, because now you're thinking about what the other person is thinking. If a thief breaks into my house, I immediately want to be in that kind of mode where I'm tracking what will he be thinking and what will he be doing next. But it's not because I intend to have a good time with him. All right? It's because I intend to defeat him. And that will not change my character at all if I'm in airplane mode. In relational mode, but under the enemy category. Right? It'll help me defeat other people, but it won't change my character. In order for mutual mind, that state of understanding what another person is thinking, and by the way, have you ever encountered somebody who was in sort of relational mode? They could tell you what God was thinking, but God still felt like their enemy. He's out to get me. He doesn't like me. He's, going to take away all good things from me. He didn't listen to me when I prayed to him about my, relative with cancer or whatever it was. And so you're tracking God, all what he's doing real carefully, but you're hating him all the way along the line. That is not really changing our character into Christ-likeness. What's necessary is not just to be in relational mode, but you also have to have a significant attachment to someone. They have to be someone you care about and love. And then if I'm in relational mode, whatever the person I care about and love thinks and does and says changes my character. But without love, even following everything that God says, does, thinks, and all of that will not have any impact on my character because I don't love him. I don't feel like this is my person. This is my being. This is the one with whom I'm connected in ways that just are so beyond understanding. I couldn't think of another day without him. We have this, this is not just God. This is my God. This is the one who forms me, who thinks with me, who understands me, who teaches me who I am, who shows me how to see the world. This is the one that somehow says to me, I want you. Because that's the fundamental human question. Do you want me? And this being looks at me and says, I want you. I want you, I formed you, I want to share every moment with you. I already do that, but you don't know it. And I want to teach you to know my voice, and to know my thoughts, and to know my ways, and to respond to me the same way that I do for you, because I go looking for you. And I want you to come looking for me. So that we can think about everything in the known universe together. And I want you to recognize my thoughts. Now, here's the wonderful thing about that, or the terrible thing. And that is, as we think with God, we begin to think more the way God thinks. And the better we get at that, the harder it becomes to know whether it's my thought or his. Right? So, my wife likes dogs. I grew up terrified of dogs. And so she would look at a dog and go, oh, what a cute puppy. And I go, there's death with 4 feet. because in Colombia, where I grew up, the dogs that were brought in by the conquistadors in order to kill the native population. They were war dogs. They hunted you down and killed you, and they were not vaccinated, so a lot of them had rabies. So I saw lots of rabid dogs running down the streets. A dog running my direction was death on 4 feet. That was my reaction. I got bit by a number of them, and then you spend the next month waiting to see if you're going to die of rabies or not, because there's no other way to do it. And that's not really a good month. So having done that 3 or 4 times, I pretty much had in my mind a reaction that when I looked at dogs, did not say, oh, what a cute puppy, all right? But I had a relationship with my wife who loved dogs, and so there's this thing, can I learn to see them the way that she sees them? Even though my mind tells me something very, very different about it. You who look like my enemy, can I begin to look at you the way that the one who loves you and loves me looks at the situation? See how that would work? And if I can learn that way, I will also develop the feelings that the other person has for whatever it is that they see, if they know it, but I know them, you see. So when you look at somebody and the person with you knows them, like I know that dog, right? It looks terrifying to me. It's got fur and 4 feet. No, I know that dog. Oh, come here. Oh, come here. And you pet that thing. Something happens inside. You begin to think and feel and develop the kind of relationship that eventually makes it our dog, right? And so Peter says, once you were enemies, but now you have become a people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. When we receive mercy, that's because God looks at you and goes like, what they're doing wrong isn't the real them. That's not what I created them for. You know, and you're pretty good at figuring out what they're doing wrong, but you're not so good at figuring out who they are meant to be, the right thing to do, the right way for this relationship to be. Leave that one to me. Let me show you how it's done. Let me show you how I treat them. Let me show you how I relate to them. Think with me and see with them. If my brain is in relational mode, I will know what God's thinking. But if I don't have an attachment to God, I will think God's just trying to screw up my life. He's trying to get me involved with all these troublesome people here and make me do good things, and that's because he hates me. But if I'm attached to God, I'm thinking, you know what? I like something about him, and even though I can't figure out what on earth he's doing and how he sees this, God's is the one who made his rain to fall on the just and the unjust. And if I could be like that, there'd be nothing other people could do that would make me think of them as my enemies, because when they do that, they're always wrong. They're figuring out the right thing to do, which is they think hate me, and they have a 100% chance of being wrong about that. And God isn't going to let that stop him, and so why should I let that stop me? I'm going to follow Daddy. I'm going to just do what he's doing. I'm going to do what it might not make any sense to me, might scare me a little, all these kinds of things. But because of how he is, I will become that way also. I want to be that sort of being. I want to think with him. And when that begins to happen, after a while, we lose track entirely about whether it's our thought or God's thought, because we're now thinking about it the same way. So when I pet our dog, I no longer think to myself, well, is this me petting the dog, or is this my wife petting the dog through me, or whatever it is? It doesn't really matter, because now it's become our dog, right? Which, by the way, we don't have a dog right now because we moved. But just so you don't go around, well, which dog is his dog? He doesn't have one right now. So, but the story still works. You see, it becomes ours, and when it's ours, we can no longer tell whether it was yours or mine, because your mind has now become part of this group identity. So the other thing that we need to know then is, so now we want to be in mutual mind with God, which means we have to be relational. And the things that Michael is teaching us about relaxing and resting, things like that, are all things that help us become relational. Now, by the way, your brain, when I say your brain goes onto an off state, on airplane mode, when it goes off, it's a little bit misleading when you think about it, because when we think of off, we think of all the power's gone, right? When your singulate is off, it's not because the power is off, it's because it's in a cramp. It's actually too high, it's been turned up too loud, too strong, and it cramped up on you. You ever had a muscle that cramped up? You can't do a thing with it, right? Effectively, it's off, but not because there's no activity in it. It's because there's way too much activity. So getting into relational mode is almost always a question of quieting ourselves. We get out of relational mode and into airplane mode because we've gotten too much signal from the world and we just can't take anymore. We're shutting it all off. Our brain does that for us. Actually, kids can actually learn how to do this a little bit intentionally, by the way. With a little practice, you can figure out how to turn off your relational mode. So someone's talking to you, but you see their lips moving. You don't hear a word that's coming out of their mouth because you are keeping yourself jammed inside and out of relational mode. So you actually can do a few things both to learn to get in and out of it. But all of that said, the way you get relational mode switched off is to get it jammed so that nothing will come through. Now your brain effectively doesn't know that there's a relationship, but not because it was asleep, but because it was too aroused, too jammed. So a lot of the things we do to quiet ourselves and quiet our body help bring our brain out of this cramp and back into a place where we can pick up a signal from someone else. But just because I got the signal on doesn't mean I like you. Right? So now I'm tracking you and your nasty ways, and I dislike you. We're enemies. And now your brain has said, I'm going to watch you, and every mistake you make. That's not what we do. And left alone, starving for joy and attachments, your brain has got some powerful ways to change how you think. See, we're changed much more by who we love than by what we think. And that's what we've all experienced. So we really have to begin to learn who it is we love and how to do that. So, okay. We're supposed to take a break at 12:30, but I want us to at least start a little exercise I'm going to do later this afternoon. And so I want to have you stand up, and I'm going to teach you reggae rhythm here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, first of all, reggae is a 4-beat rhythm, so we're going to clap. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Not bad. See, now what your brain is learning to do right now is synchronize with me and all the people around you. We're actually getting into a group mutual state in order to do that. But reggae also drops the first beat. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. So now on the drop beat, we're going to think about Jesus' presence. So to begin with, I'm just going to say Jesus, 2, 3, 4. Jesus, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now just to make it a little more fun, instead of saying Jesus, I want you to go to your golden memory, the place that you connect with God, and connect with God while we're doing this together. You see, this is what your brain is having to learn if we're going to learn how to listen to God while we're with other people. We're going to have to stay in rhythm with what they're doing, the people around us, but we're also going to try to get our connection on with God, right? So take a moment and connect with God, and you're that golden place. See if you can sense His presence. We realize not everybody can. Some of us are in airplane mode just because of how the day's been going. That's okay. We got a signal here on the Wi-Fi. All right? So, now connect with that sense of Jesus. Ready? And we're going to do the beat. And this time, whenever we come to the silent beat, you're going to just connect with Jesus again. And then with the other 3 beats, we'll connect with each other. So, We'll say Jesus the first time just so you know when the first beat is coming. So, Jesus, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. All right, very good. Now, that's not all there is to reggae. It also adds an extra beat. So it can be added almost on any of the beats, but typically it's on the third beat. So it goes 2, 3, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. Now connect with Jesus again, and we're going to keep the real reggae beat going. So, see it? This is how life is. It gets more and more complicated, and you're trying to keep connected with God, which is hard when the person in front of you is suffering or missing a beat or doing something else like that, and you're trying to keep this rhythm going. So, all right, so here we go. I'll say Jesus the first time again. So, Jesus. Okay, now, we'll keep moving this along, and we'll pick this exercise up again this afternoon, but for the sake of our lunch break, here's what I want you to do now. Normally, remember, we either attack or withdraw from people. Most of us have learned socially to withdraw from our faces. So our joy is not on our face. I can't tell you how many people who they're looking, I said, well, you look sort of sad. No, I got a huge smile. No, I'm pretty sure that's not a huge smile. Because they're so withdrawn from they live like 18 inches behind their face. That's typical of society. We don't. So what I want you to do is let Jesus share your face right now. So as we're doing this, you connect with him. Whatever look is on his face or you sense is about him, because you may not see his face, but whatever you sense is, let your face reflect that. All right? So let's try that. Again, I'll say Jesus the first time. Jesus. Okay, now the last part of the exercise, gather in groups of 3 thereabouts, looking at each other, and we're going to do the exercise, only this time just share your face with Jesus and look at each other. So let Jesus look out your face, your eyes at the other people in the group. So groups of 2 or 3, whatever. Okay. You're sort of grouped up there, so here we go. You ready for the beat? Here we go. Jesus. Jesus. All right, give yourselves a hand.